Hello, everyone. It's James Donnelly coming to you from the CASA Group Plantation Office, and welcome to episode 1 of what we're calling the Association Leadership Webinar. And I need to explain before I introduce our guest. So we did these webinar series really in a response to the coronavirus and the need in our communities and in our boards to get some guidance on what do we do. And your response has been so incredible and feedback so strong. We decided that this is something we should make permanent. And we've coined it the Association Leadership Webinar Series because that's what you are for our communities. And I know we and your residents are grateful for that. So welcome to episode 1 of this second season. It's like the TV, Donna. You've always wanted to be a TV star, so here we are.
I don't know that we knew this was going to keep going this long, but I'm grateful it has. It's been a lot of fun. We've gotten some great feedback.
And with that, Donna, I want to reintroduce you, Donna Berger, shareholder at the Becker Law Firm, and has become an icon on this series. And a lot of people have enjoyed listening to your brilliance, Donna. And we're really blessed. In fact, Donna, I put on a tie today for Spencer Hennings, our Florida condominium.
I can't help but notice that you put a tie on for Spencer and never for me, but I'm excited to talk to Spencer as well.
Anyone that gets appointed by the governor gets a tie. I think that's the rule. But Spencer, we're going to talk in a bit. So welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
One other thing I better do before I go on, though, is my parents watch this up in Ottawa, Canada, every time we put this on, Donna, and they're always telling me how great you are, and I'm trying to remind them that I'm the son, but it's my mom's 87th birthday today, so I thought we better say
happy birthday, Mrs. Donnelly.
Happy birthday, Mom. All right, so I know we have some new and some returning listeners, and we've had a lot of requests. I've even had some people on our last show, Donna, say they rewatched it because there was so much about phase 3 in there. And so we've recorded all of those at casagroup.com. You just click on our COVID banner and it'll take you. In fact, we've got so many, Donna, we've actually created a link to another website. It was making our website too slow. But if you have any interest in this episode after we've talked or any past, they're all available. And similarly, if you have any questions, just shoot them into info@casagroup.com and we'll get you answers. As always, technical difficulty, just log off and log on. It's the best way, and Zoom's been doing a great job. And then finally, we have Donna giving us all kinds of great guidance, but not advice, because you need to get that from your own attorney, unless Donna is your attorney. And then the other thing I wanted to say is the polling has really been well received. A lot of the feedback we're getting from you is thank you for doing the polling because it helps us learn what other communities are doing. Sometimes as board members, we think we're out on an island. So we're going to continue that today. In fact, I think Mayor Ness, let's put up polling question 1 because it's the one where we've been asking recently just to see if people are adjusting their COVID plans and restrictions. And while people are answering that, I just wanted to kind of walk you through the sequence we're going to do today. I'm going to ask Donna to give us a little update on what's changed legislatively. Then we're going to jump in and introduce Spencer and ask him a bunch of questions. And then we're going to end with your open Q&A, both the questions that you submitted to us and the ones that you are chatting in right now, I see. And I see one of my teammates, Patty Shaw, saying happy birthday. It's her birthday today, so that's going well. Okay, let's share the results of that poll question 1. And so here's of all the people that have responded, those are being shared now, right, Mayor Ness? So we have a few increasing, and Donna, I think that's probably communities where we've had infections, or there's a lot of questions I want to ask after we talk to Spencer about snowbirds and what do we do with all these people coming back from other areas. Now look at the decreasing, Donna. That's starting to reflect phase 3, and then no change is the biggest one, which you'll be happy about. So there's that, and then I wanted to give a quick update with respect to executive orders. We haven't had any new ones in Florida, but we did have a new one on October 8th in Texas, Executive Order 32. And for our Texas listeners, I will just tell you, it's not significant change as it relates to condo and HOA. It's actually a little more restrictive because of your uptick in cases, but mostly related to business. And also, we're often asked, where do we get our data on coronavirus and other things? And so, Mariness, please bring up the Florida scorecard so our audience can see some of the data. And just, if you notice on this screen, the number 2441.5, that's, I'm pointing to it, not that you can see that, but that's the average new cases. And if it's green, that's good. It means it's going down. If it's red, it's bad. But the other thing you'll see there is the positivity rate of 4.52. And so that's good. Anything under 5 is good. And the fact that it's green means it's decreasing. That's also good. And this is the kind of information we're all looking at in our communities to see if we should be adjusting our plans. And just before I leave that, by the way, look at the population of Florida now, 22 million people, but you can actually drop this down by county. So, Marinus, just pick a random county there, and that'll give you your information for wherever you're listening from. So great data. Donna, it looks to me like since we last met, the October 1st moratorium on rents and mortgage payments was let to lapse by Governor DeSantis. Any comments to our listeners about what that means to our communities?
Well, it didn't. Remember, that moratorium, James, did not apply to association foreclosures. So even from the start of this pandemic, it was business as usual for associations in terms of their own collection policies. I would hope that there was more communication, that there were perhaps more payment plans, but in terms of associations being able to proceed with liens and foreclosures, the governor's previous order did not impact them. What the lapse in the moratorium now for lender foreclosures may mean, though, is that we may have owners who are squeezed financially because now they have to make the decision to start paying their loan again. And depending on the impact of COVID on their livelihoods and their health, we may see an uptick of association delinquencies as a result.
Yeah, and the other thing, Donna, is a lot of the investor-owned units, if the renter didn't pay their rent, then the owner doesn't pay their association dues. We haven't actually seen that in the data yet, but October 1 was only last week. So, okay, and then we've moved all of the state to phase 3, but we do have a looming date, November 3rd, where the state of emergency expires if not extended. And I think you and I, Donna, are both of the belief that it's probably not going to get extended again. It may, but I don't think we can count on it. So any comments on November 3rd, or more importantly, November 4th?
Right. Well, and like you said, James, I would be surprised if the governor extends the statewide state of emergency. All indicators is that he wants to move us into a more normal state of affairs. If there's a huge uptick in cases, that may change. But assuming our hunches are correct and that the state of emergency is not extended beyond November 3rd, then the question is, what do boards do? Do the emergency powers continue? And this is particularly important in communities that are perhaps 55 and over, or even in communities that may still have an active infection or infections. The reality is that the emergency statutory powers in 718, 719, and 720 do not have a finite cutoff date. It doesn't mean that come November 4th, necessarily they are completely dead. There is language in each of those chapters and those powers that says that they continue for a reasonable time. So I would urge associations come November 4th, if they, still have a need to continue to either close amenities or reduce hours of operations for amenities, or impose COVID protocols like facial coverings. Because remember, we're heading into the winter months, which all of the medical experts have told us is going to be a riskier time. We don't have a vaccine. So speak to council and find out whether or not your emergency powers under the statute continue, but also look and see what your rulemaking authority is under the case law and under your documents.
Yeah, and I think I always like to highlight what I hope our audience takes away. This is a big takeaway. As a board, you have to have thought through what November 4th looks like in your community. Up till now, I think our expectations have always been that the emergency powers will be extended, but given what Governor DeSantis has done in terms of moving phase 3, that's a clear indication to me that it won't. So hopefully at the end of this, we may be able to do a little deeper dive, Donna, but the takeaway at this moment is please, boards, make sure you have a November 4 plan and that you've discussed it with your council.
Reach out. I would just say, James, lastly, reach out now for that opinion, because come November 4th, the response on your residents' behalf is going to be everything should be open now that the statewide state of emergency is over, and that may not be the case. So get those opinions now, and like you said, have a plan.
Okay, Mayor Ness, I'd like you to put up, please, poll question number 2. Spencer, you're going to appreciate this one, and I'm going to move to introduce you, Spencer Hennings, the governor-appointed Florida condominium ombudsman. So welcome, Spencer, and we're just thrilled to have you here. I can see questions coming along already about DBPR. So maybe if you could just briefly introduce yourself. I know you're an attorney, but in terms of the qualifications that you brought to this office, and then tell us a bit about what the role of the office is, because I think there's a lot of confusion between your office and the division. So Spencer, welcome. We're grateful you're here.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to answer that. But before, I just want to say you guys are providing an amazing resource here. I've watched a couple episodes that you've done in the past, and I think with both of your backgrounds and both of your perspectives, this is a really, really great informational resource, and it was very much needed. So thank you for having me on it today. And yes, as you mentioned, I'm the condominium ombudsman for the state of Florida. I've been in and around real estate my entire life. When I was in high school, I used to work in my grandfather's law office, and he was a real estate attorney in Miami Beach. Actually, I was born in Miami Beach. I went to the University of Miami Law School, and then I got a secondary degree called an LLM in real estate development from the University of Miami. So I'm a real estate guy through and through. The condominium ombudsman is a very, very unique position. I don't know if there's any other one in any other state, but if you're curious, it's statute 718-5012. There's about 10 subheadings in there talking about the ombudsman's powers and duties. But in my mind, I've kind of boiled it down into 4 main categories. The first is education. So I've been talking a lot with Secretary Beshears over the past year about this, and we firmly believe that education is extremely needed because it will allow us to prevent problems in condominiums from popping up before they arise. And a lot of times the issues that I deal with arise from a lack of education. People don't know what they're supposed to do, what they're allowed to do, what their rights are. So the more education we can provide on that, the better. And to meet that goal, I've been designing this entire curriculum that I'm hoping by January we're going to launch, and it's going to be a webinar series for now. After the pandemic, hopefully I'll be able to travel throughout the state and offer this at the various cities, but for now it's going to be a webinar.
Well,
so that's the
Donna
first.
And I can help you with the webinar, Spencer.
Great. A second thing that we do in my office is election monitoring. Now, this is a really great resource, and I'm advocating it. I want as many associations to take advantage of this as possible. Basically, with a 15% unit owner petition can be initiated by the board or a unit owner, or 6 units, whichever is greater, 15% or 6. You send a petition to my office, and we appoint an unbiased, neutral, independent contractor election monitor that's trained and educated and competent to come in and conduct the election. This person is going to count the ballots, tally everything, work with the attorney, make sure that there's no questions afterwards that this was a correctly done election. It's a great resource, and if anyone listening is interested in becoming an election monitor, feel free to reach out to my office. It's a paid independent contractor position, by the way. The third thing that we do, and by the way, I want to give a shout out to my staff. I have 7 staff members, and they're fantastic. I hope they're all listening right now. We do dispute resolution. So I'm taking a really active role with this, and it's kind of like a mediator. I work as a mediator a lot of times, and every day I'm on the phone for hours with attorneys and managers and board members and unit owners, of course, trying to work out and find some sort of creative solution that both sides are going to be happy with. And a lot of times, just having someone representing the state of Florida emailing the other party, we'll get it resolved very quickly. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. I do that hours every day, and it's really exciting. And the last bit that I would say is making recommendations about new condominium law to the legislature. So I'm always talking with attorneys and local and statewide politicians about what can be done to make life better for people living in condominiums in Florida.
Excellent, Spencer. Thank you. Can you share the results of the poll? It looks like we have a little work for Spencer to do here, Donna. Have you ever interacted with the Office of the Ombudsman? Not very many. So it looks like you have some unfilled potential there, Spencer.
Absolutely.
And then while we're doing that, because you mentioned election monitoring, and I would like to put up poll question 3, Mariness, for those that, and there's already questions coming in, Spencer, is this condo or HOA? And I'm going to allow you to clarify, but this is the condominium ombudsman. We do not, in our state of Florida, have an equivalent currently in HOA, and I know, Spencer, you have some feelings about that. The other thing, I know we have some Texas listeners. I do not believe this position exists for condos or HOAs in Texas. But one of the things that if we get to it, Spencer, I do want to ask you about, because what you just told us is you're really performing kind of a mediator, arbitrator, bringing people together without litigation role. And I think we may be able to learn from you in terms of ways that Donna and myself and our board members can do that for our clients as well. Okay, but I did want to find out how many people have ever used election monitors, and so please share that, Mariness, with our audience.
Spencer, are you ever contacted by cooperatives? I know the cooperatives always get overlooked in Florida, but we do have a number. I personally represent a number of cooperatives. Are you ever contacted by cooperative owners?
Not really. We get a lot of people calling in from HOAs and emailing, and unfortunately at this point I just don't have jurisdiction over HOAs. Not too many unit owners from co-ops though.
We have
I'm hoping all that's going to change.
We have some questions coming in about where are you and how we get a hold of you. Where's your office? How many on your staff? I think you mentioned it. And we do have on our last slide today your contact information, Spencer, but you're located, I think, here in Fort Lauderdale area?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale. That's where our office is. And actually, I've been working closely with the city of Sunny Isles down in Miami. And I have an agreement with them that they've given me an office and a conference room in their town hall, which I can use as a satellite office. So I've just started this, and every other week I'll be going down there. And I have a full day scheduled with unit owners from anyone in Miami-Dade that wants to come in and schedule a meeting with me. So if you do want to schedule a meeting with me, feel free to call the office. Our email server is currently down, unfortunately, but call us and we will get back to you if we're busy at the time. And I'm happy to meet with anyone that wants to come in and meet with me.
You are about to get a deluge of calls and emails, but I also wanted to ask you, Spencer, really quickly. The statute says that the Office of the Ombudsman will be located in Leon County. Is there still a presence in Leon County?
We do have a presence in Leon County, but I believe the statute may have been changed.
Well, it says in other locations, but it would appear that there is like a permanent Leon County presence.
Sure, and we do have an office in Tallahassee.
Okay.
Did we share this one? Can you see the election monitoring results up there?
No.
Okay, let's.
That was the prior screen, and I think there were very few, 14% if ever hired an election monitor.
Okay. Spencer, we've got some questions already coming in. I think with the confusion between DBPR and your office. So maybe explain the distinction between DBPR. You mentioned Secretary Shears, who's the Secretary of the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. But you were appointed by the governor, am I correct?
That is correct. It's a governor-appointed position. And administratively, I mentioned Secretary Beshears because I do work with him. And administratively, I am within the DBPR. Within the DBPR, I'm within the Division of Condos, Timeshares, and Mobile Homes. Now, this is a position that kind of works as a liaison between the division and the department and condo owners throughout the state.
Okay, so I think what I want our listeners to understand, HOA or condo, the DBPR still operates as a regulatory body. And in the condo world, if you want to not go to DBPR and try and get something resolved through the ombudsman, I think that's actually a great first step. But in HOA or condo, if you have a complaint, the department remains the appropriate venue. So Spencer, first of all, have you ever lived in a condo or an HOA?
I have. I've owned a condo for about 4 years now.
Okay, so you've lived this dream.
I've lived it.
And I have a lot.
James asked if he's been on the board.
Yeah. Have you been on the board yet, Spencer?
I actually have not been on the board. We have a great board and a great manager, and because of that, no one wants to vote. So I let them do their thing, and I have consulted with the manager on numerous occasions. Didn't give him legal advice. We just talked things over. But no, they're doing a great job, and I'm not on the board there.
What's the main question I'm getting right now for you, Spencer, is describe a couple types of calls you're getting.
Oh man, I get such a variety of issues. Every day is different, and every single case is different. I mean, after this call, I'll be working on a case in Miami-Dade where a unit owner is alleging that a board member is stalking and sexually harassing her. So I'm getting involved with that. Of course, I recommended call the police, but I'm working with them on the condo law side of that. After that, I've got things about material alterations. I deal with COVID issues every day. People want the common elements opened, and other associations, they don't want them opened. So I'm working to kind of resolve issues, and I don't tell anyone what to do. I educate them on what the law says, and we work to find creative solutions so everyone feels heard, understood, and we work to find a solution that everyone's all right with.
Right. So you're not a fining body or disciplinary body. You're a solution body.
Right. In the event that I do uncover a violation of Chapter 718 Condominium Act, I would then turn that over to the division and recommend enforcement action. And on the other hand, when I uncover criminal acts such as embezzlement, I don't have the authority to go and arrest and prosecute anyone. So I've been working and I have a great relationship with the police departments and state attorney's offices throughout the state. And I have contacts in both those organizations throughout the state that I can turn over the evidence to and make sure that arrest and prosecution is underway.
And have you noticed an uptick in cases or calls because of COVID?
So I was appointed in July this year. COVID was already in full swing. But of course, we have great records. And yes, we have seen an uptick. And we even keep track of the time that we've spent on COVID-related matters just to keep that metric. And it's pretty substantial.
I'm just going to answer some questions live here. Spencer's last name is Hennings, Hennings. And could you repeat, Spencer, I think a couple of our listeners missed the fourth thing that you do related to legislation.
Sure. So part of my responsibility is to propose changes in legislation to the legislators and working with the governor. That we can either alter, add, or take things out of the statutes that will make life better for condominium owners throughout the state.
Thank you very much. The other thing,
James, I would just add to that, and to you too, Spencer. I often feel, listen, one of the things we're assured in Florida is every year there is going to be association legislation proposed, but sometimes it's just too much tinkering. So we change something one session, and then without letting it gel for a year or two to see how it's going to work, the next session we're back with a glitch bill. So, the ability to propose legislation is great. Sometimes it's a good session if we don't change anything, because we're just waiting to see how the prior changes, if they work or not. Would you agree?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I can't give a blanket answer like that. There are things that I want to change, definitely. So that's where I'm at.
what would you advise our listeners, HOA or condo, like what have you found has worked in terms of bringing parties together? What can we learn, not so much from your office, but your experience of the process of resolving conflict in associations?
100% transparency and empathy. When people living in condos feel that the board is making decisions in the dark and not listening to them, not hearing them, that's when issues pop up. But if a board is, empathetic, compassionate, listening to people, and then explaining their decisions, I think that's a great step in the right direction to preventing these issues from popping up.
Yeah, Donna, you and I have talked a lot about that through COVID. The number one thing we can do as boards is communicate to our residents about what we're doing and why, and especially, and if we have legal
The more communication, the better. Although I will mention that it was National Mental Health Day a few days ago, and some of the issues and some of the frustrations is not always because a board is being unempathetic, but you are dealing with sometimes mental health issues in these communities, and those are some of the most difficult issues to contend with.
Yeah, I want to tell our audience the mental health, was mental health day, I think yesterday or the day before, and we've had a lot of questions from our boards. How do we deal with the angry resident who doesn't like that the pool's not open or whatnot? And look at the anxiety in our world right now, and especially in our associations, is high. So we explored bringing a mental health professional onto this webinar in hopes to help our audience. But I will tell you, we kind of role played it, and it wasn't a topic that converted well to this to this venue. So right now we've kind of put that one on hold. Not to say it's not important. We just don't know that this is the best way to do it. So, okay, we want to jump into some of the phase 3 changes in Florida and some of the coronavirus issues that still remain, Spencer. But I would like to know, and I hope you stay and participate in the questions as they come in, but I don't want to take the floor away until maybe you share a couple of things that you'd like to see happen, some initiatives as the new ombudsman that you'd like to have take place in your office.
Sure. So my kind of mission with this position is I want this to be a really useful and accessible resource for unit owners throughout the state. I think it's very much needed. We have millions of Floridians living in condos, and it's very much needed. And this is really my goal. When people come and interact with my office, whether that's calling or emailing them with a question about what the law says or requesting an election monitor, I want them to walk away with a very positive impression. I want them to walk away feeling, wow, the state of Florida actually really does care about me and was very helpful and helped me get through this situation that I'm in. So that's really my main goal. And, I think I mentioned that we're really boning up on the education. I'm taking a really active role with the dispute resolution, and I'm hoping to continue working with other cities the same way I have with Sunny Isles throughout the state, especially when the pandemic is over. That can be, very mobile, traveling throughout the state and meeting with people and getting things resolved. So that's a big goal. And I also, I really want to do more elections. I think voting is really the only source of power that unit owners have. and we really need to make sure that these elections are happening legally and fairly. So, in my mind, I'd be happy if we monitored every election in Florida. And, I wanted 10 times the amount of elections that the office did before I got here. So that's how I'd answer that.
Well, that leads me into one more question before we keep going here. Who can be a monitor, and what does it cost the association to have a monitor, election monitor?
Sure. So the statute has some language on that, but right now I'm looking for attorneys. I'm looking for licensed managers that are interested in becoming monitors. Now, what the law says is when 15% or 6 units make the petition to my office, whichever is greater, the association is then legally obligated to pay for that monitor. And it's a sliding scale. It depends on the amount of units that you have in your association. It could be as little as $250, could be as high as $1,000, maybe more if you're coming from a giant association. But the idea is that when you're splitting that cost between all the units and the association's paying for it, in my mind, it's negligible when you consider the benefit that you're getting.
Okay, well, that's going to segue nicely into Marinette's question 4, polling question 4. And while that's up, Donna, every week we're getting questions, and I think it's worth revisiting. Can we as a board, hold our annual meeting, election budget meetings virtually post November 3rd?
Yeah, so for some communities, this is an open and shut question because their documents specify that they can hold meetings virtually. I will tell you that when I do document rewrites, we are adding that language in because, look, it's the wave of the future, online voting, virtual meetings. This sort of technology makes life easier, and it also increases membership participation, and it increases transparency, as Spencer has been talking about. So for those communities where it's in their documents, open and shut. For others that don't have it in their documents, we are now looking at emergency powers to see if we can make virtual meetings part of that disaster plan under subsection F of the emergency powers. And the answer, in my opinion, is yes. And many of our communities are doing either virtual meetings or a hybrid where they will have a limited in-person venue, and then they will have the rest on a virtual Zoom type platform. And this is easier than if you're dealing with an election. Now, if you're dealing with an election, particularly a condominium election, we have to be very careful about making sure that the ballots are open and they are opened in the presence of the unit owners, which is what is required. So I'm sure Spencer and I talked about this before. The election monitor can be there watching, and other people can be watching on Zoom. And then lastly, for our HOAs, James, some of those require nominations from the floor. Some have used a condominium type of election protocol, but others still follow the statute with nominations from the floor. Gets a little bit tricky with a Zoom or virtual type platform, but it's not impossible. And as you know, I'm on the Florida Bar's task force to revisit these statutory emergency powers. And one of the things we're looking in our bill proposal is to make it abundantly clear that virtual meetings will be possible in the midst of a public health emergency.
Well, Donna, you've made the recommendation repeatedly, and I really think the COVID-19 has exposed the inadequacy of our documents in many of our communities. And I do think it's time to do a fairly comprehensive amendment. I say that only because if you're going to amend your documents, you might as well amend your documents and bring them current. Having said that, I think for you and Spencer, why don't we just deal with this in Tallahassee and make it legislatively lawful to have them virtual? But the takeaway I want to leave with our audience is you don't necessarily have the ability to hold your meetings virtually. And so that's something you really need to do between now and November 3rd. But something
James, I will only say we also look to 617, which is the general not-for-profit statute, which does have an ability to hold meetings virtually. But again, technology is here to hopefully make our lives easier. I will tell you, I've attended elections in large multifamily buildings, condos with hundreds of units. And in the old-fashioned way, we may have been there for hours. I think the latest I ever left one of those meetings was 1 a.m. But Now, what we saw before COVID, even with online voting, that time was reduced by half or more.
Yeah, I think that, I think it's the way to go, obviously. And our experience is we have more people participating. They may be out of town, or they may be up in their condo unit, or just don't want to come down to the clubhouse in an HOA. But, obviously we're all about inclusiveness. And so what about the person who says, I don't have the electronics to participate? Does that mean there should always be a physical presence to the meeting instead of having it 100% virtual?
If we're only talking about meetings, James, all of these platforms have a phone feature. So at the very least, everybody has a phone, everybody can call in. In terms of voting online, the statute makes it clear that you have to allow people to vote by mail. And that's only fair, because there are some people that they just, voting online would not be their preferred way of casting a vote. But in terms of attending a meeting, you can use the phone feature. If you're not comfortable with the computer, just call in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, let's share the results of poll question 4, Marinette. Do you plan to have your annual meeting election in person? 17%, virtually 40%, hybrid, which is what I was referencing there, and then I don't know, are probably either non-board members or they haven't got to their meeting planning yet. So that's interesting. I mean, I think if we did this poll 12 months ago, it would be in person, 98% and virtually 2%. So I always ask people and businesses and organizations, what is it that you've learned in COVID-19 that you're going to make permanent? And I suspect we'll never have our meetings go back fully to in person as one outcome of that.
So one important thing just to say here, for the 27% who don't know, hopefully that's just because they're still working out the mechanics and they don't think that COVID has given them an excuse not to have an annual meeting or an election this year. That's not that. I had a client the other day ask, well, will there be a 1-year moratorium on elections? The answer is a vehement no. You have to have your annual meeting and your election. Make it safe, keep it safe, but not having it and saying we're just going to cancel it this year is not an option.
Excellent. We're talking about the after November 3rd plan, and I realize I have a poll question here to help share with our audience what other communities are doing. Marinette, put up poll question 5, please, now. And Donna, while that's going up, can you just kind of quickly explain the impact of phase 3, which has really been about the right to open your business and the right to work versus a county mandate versus an association mandate? Because the primary question we're getting from our clients is, do I have to comply with the state and county ordinances?
So to answer the question, the phase 3 reopen order that Governor DeSantis issued on September 25th, as you said, is designed to stimulate business, particularly indoor dining in restaurants. For the vast majority of private residential communities, this order does not speak to you. For our mixed-use condos, where you've got a commercial component, if your COVID protocols have been overly restrictive in terms of occupancy for those commercial units, speak to your attorney. You are likely going to have to loosen up those protocols with regard to commerce that's going on in your community. But for the vast majority of private residential communities, the phase 3 reopen really does not have impact on your particular COVID protocols. We still have a statewide state of emergency in effect until November 3rd. As we said at the outset, those emergency powers may continue for a period of time after November 3rd, depending on your particular community's situation and your population and your ability to manage your amenities and your visitors. So what does this mean? It means for right now, you can still enforce facial coverings. By the way, James, many of the local ordinances have repealed a lot of their restrictions, but have left the facial covering requirement in place. So facial coverings, if you've still got certain amenities, whether it's a gym or a pool closed, phase 3 doesn't mean you need to reopen it right now. If you've got reduced hours of operation, phase 3 reorder does not mean you need to increase that. And you may want to continue to be cautious, because the worst thing, and we've said this time and again, is if you've got reduced hours of operation now and you are pressured to increase that back to your January 2020 schedule, as the numbers, if the numbers head in the wrong direction, you may have to pull back again. And it's that whiplash kind of reaction, I think, that makes it really hard on people. They get used to something, then they get used to something else, and now you pull them back again.
Yeah, if you think your residents are upset now, wait till you give it to them and then take it away.
Again, right.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the masks. One of the things that Governor DeSantis said is there will be no fines for lack of not wearing masks. But again, that doesn't apply to our associations, correct?
No, it doesn't. And one other thing I want to mention is, we've got a lot of very seasonal communities. I'm sure, Spencer, particularly in Miami-Dade, we've got a lot of out-of-state owners, international owners. We are going to have people returning to their Florida properties in the coming months. I think November is when we really kick into high gear here for season. While our Florida numbers are quite steady right now, and that's positive, we're looking at places like Wisconsin and other places where you've got increasing numbers. We've got some fires going on in other parts of the country. Those folks may be coming down to their Florida properties, and your boards need to start making plans for how you're going to handle that. And part of your COVID protocols may be out-of-state owners coming back need to refrain from using the amenities for a certain number of days. So speak to council about that, because it's going to start happening in the coming weeks.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I have two questions on here, one about restaurants and one about snowbirds. Share, Marinette, the results of poll question 5, please. So this is, have you got a plan? So we still have 60% of our associations that haven't come up with their November 4th plan. So we've already talked enough about that. But the first one was on restaurants. So we have a lot of our communities that have cafes or some kind of food service in them. And I know that phase 3 was very much about opening restaurants. But again, and I know I'm kind of getting you to repeat yourself, the fact that phase 3, it doesn't mean I have to open my cafe in my clubhouse or my condo, correct?
It does not. This is not applying to concessions in your community. Many of those dining services I will tell you from experience, in many of my communities, they are subsidized by the assessments. These are not for-profit businesses. These are value-added amenities in these communities, and you're going to look to restrict them as you would any of your other amenities, whether it's the pool or the gym. The difference being the commercial unit, the mixed condos, is different. In a mixed condo, you've got somebody who maybe has let's say a retail jewelry store, and they've bought a commercial unit in your high-rise building. That is a for-profit business, and they are going to be looking to make sure that their phase 3 rights to reopen are honored. So it's a different situation. But in terms of indoor dining, that's one of your amenities, and you're going to look to apply reasonable COVID protocols to managing that amenity.
So we have, I'm making it up, pool restrictions. Our community has decided that, we have some restrictions on pool use, and the emergency powers are reduced, and we're beyond a reasonable time. I have to lift those restrictions on our pool. That's my question. If I'm a condo or HOA.
If you have no infections, if you continue to monitor, if you were going to reopen, I would reopen safely and smartly. I would take baby steps. I would reopen a limited number of days a week, limited number of hours of operation. Make sure you're monitoring. You may want to continue to prohibit guest usage of that pool or the clubhouse, and see how it goes. We're not saying you can't relax your restrictions at all. You can certainly try, but take it slow and make sure remember, this is all about providing a standard of due care.
But I guess my question is, if there's no emergency powers as a board member or as a board, how can I restrict use of amenities? I should have to open them up completely.
Okay, so there's a line of great question, James. There's case law, the Beechwood Villas case, the Hidden Harbor Estates case. Boards have the ability to pass rules regarding their common areas, okay? Now you need to look, again, this is gonna require a legal opinion. I'm not giving you a legal opinion, because my client's listening, call me later. But you do have some ability to regulate your common areas. For instance, pools are not open. Before COVID, James, pools were not open 24 hours a day. Boards made decisions to say, we're gonna close the pool at dusk. Perhaps they didn't have proper lighting. We're only gonna open them certain days. So boards were making these rules before COVID. The stakes are just higher right now. So if you closed your pool at dusk before, maybe you only had it open 7 or 8 hours a day, in the midst of a pandemic, even after emergency powers end and before a vaccine comes out, you may want to say, we only want to have it open 4 hours a day.
Yeah, this is where I'm going with this, Donna, is I don't want our listeners to think that all of a sudden at midnight, November 3rd, it's the wild, wild west. At all points in time, COVID or no COVID, the board had authority to have reasonable rules. In fact, it reminds me of a great warning that you've given us throughout, and that is that the risks the association of relaxing may be more than the risk of keeping a good, reasonable rule in place. One can cost a life, and the other is an inconvenience. So.
I think some of our residents have lost sight of the fact that one of the board's main jobs is to set some parameters. I'll tell you a funny story. I had one community and we're working up the rules, and one of the rules was you have to wear clothing in the gym. And I said, why is this a rule? Because they actually had two people going to the gym without clothes on. So boards have made decisions before about how to operate and manage their amenities. But remember, the stakes are higher right now in the midst of an ongoing pandemic. Whether or not the emergency powers continue past November 3rd, this is not business as usual in terms of managing your amenities.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple of questions here that we've answered in past episodes, Donna, but it leads me also to my poll question 6, Mariness. The age-old question that we've had for the last 6 months: our amenities have been closed. You haven't had to pay for them. Why isn't my maintenance going down? Donna, why isn't my board changing my maintenance if the amenities aren't open?
Well, in some cases, it's because there are additional costs related to sanitization. In some cases, you've got additional legal costs in terms of enforcing those protocols. I can't tell you how many demand letters we've had to send out because people are not adhering to the facial covering requirement, to the hours of operation, or the social distancing in some of the amenities. So in terms of, hey, why isn't it going down? I guess the question should be happy it's not going up more. Those amenities still need to be maintained. Just because you've closed the pool, it still needs to be maintained each month. It needs to be insured. So that's really the answer. And by the way, there are times when amenities are closed for weeks or months at a time as they undergo renovations. And we rarely have people at that time say, well, I don't want to pay for it. I understand the pool or the tennis court is being redone, but I can't use it.
Okay, can you share the results, please, Mariness? I was interested in our boards, what they see, because we're right in the midst of finalizing our 21 budgets now, and you would rarely see 51% increasing maintenance. And I will tell you that number one, there is some budgeting going on for next year's COVID for items that, we've changed our physical plant somewhat. We've increased our security for monitoring. We've increased our cleaning protocols. All of that costs money, so I'm not surprised to see this. And also for Florida, especially Southeast Florida, and especially condominiums, the renewal rates we're getting on insurance are, frankly, they're upsetting because, condos and HOAs are not designed to have our maintenance fees going up and down like a roller coaster. In a perfect world, we keep a good pace that matches the income of our constituency. But you can see here, 51% are going to increase their budget this year.
I suspect, James, that some of our listeners, especially remember we had Andrea Northrup on insurance advisors, we may be related to the legal defense, the legal gap coverage we talked about.
Yeah.
So, this was the first year that many boards started thinking, hey, we don't have coverage for certain types of claims. And I don't know of a product out there, a reasonably priced product that would protect the association against a negligence claim related to a communicable disease. But we do know there's legal gap coverage out there that they can get for at least the legal defense fees when they get hit with these negligence claims.
Yeah, and we spoke about that earlier in this pandemic, but it is true. There is something called gap insurance, and a lot of our communities, I think we polled it one day, and it was a good almost 50%. We're looking at that because we don't know where the litigation is going to fall on this, but we do know someone's got to pay for the defense, so that is a good consideration. I don't want to. We're running into our time, and so Spencer, I'm going to ask Donna one more question, but just to pre-frame you've been listening to our discussion on COVID, and I'm going to give you a chance just to see if you have any more comments as it relates to your office or otherwise on what you've heard. But Donna, we're in the middle of political season. I haven't had a lot of questions on the chat board, but I know our boards are very interested in what are the rules about political signs in our communities. Can you share a bit of thought on that?
So the rules are going to vary from community to community, James. Some communities really don't have a rule regarding signage, in which case if somebody wants to put up a political sign for the candidate of their choice, they can. Now in other communities, they're quite strict about this. In a Florida HOA, there's one sign that you have to permit, and that is a security sign within 10 feet from the entrance of the home. Other than that, you can restrict other types of signage. I will tell you, in most of my communities, they just don't want that kind of noise in the community. We're in a fairly contentious election cycle right now. People like to go home and not have to deal with the competing offensive signs. I won't even get into all of the disputes back and forth we've seen. At the end of the day, somebody may say, it's my constitutional right to put up the sign of a political sign. The answer is, I actually have a podcast on this. The answer is no, it's really not. In Florida, condos and HOAs and cooperatives have not been deemed to be state actors, and you need a state actor in order to assert your constitutional right to free speech. So the answer is, if you're bored and your community, if you really don't want this type of signage in your community, talk to council and pass the necessary rules.
Excellent. Spencer, you've been listening intently. I've watched on this exciting discussion about life in condos and HOAs. Any final thoughts on what you heard, the coronavirus, and/or how our listeners can take advantage of your generous services at the condominium ombudsman office? Spencer.
Sure, thank you. First, I agree with everything that was said during this podcast. I think it was very well worded, and I would continue to listen if you're a board member or a unit owner. Again, thank you for providing this resource. What I would say is, if you're a board member, you really have to be consulting with your attorney that's going to be familiar with your documents and, of course, what the law says. And every step of the way, every decision you make, you should be consulting with your attorney. And you got to find a way to budget for that if it's not within your budget now. But I would highly recommend that you continue to consult with your attorneys. I really feel for the board members, because if there's one thing I've learned during the pandemic dealing with condos, it's that you cannot please everyone in your association. There's going to be people that want the pool open because they're staying home and they want to be able to exercise. And then there's going to be people that want it closed because it's risk. So, you have to speak with your attorney and make these decisions on a case-by-case basis, and just be transparent, like I said before, and be empathetic to people. Let them know that you hear them. And I think that everyone's going to be all right. And I know, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Division of Condos, but I know that the division is working with boards, and the division isn't really setting out on this crusade to go find people. It's difficult for everyone, and the state is very well aware of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Congratulations, first of all, Spencer, and thanks for all you're doing for our little condo community that we're all part of. Donna, you always get the last word. For some reason, I feel like I'm at home. The same thing happens in my house. But I think it would be interesting for our audience in closing. Has there been one or two things that have come, calls that you've gotten in the last month that were enlightening, or you'd like to share, or you're aware of some litigation that has taken place that maybe is a warning? So I just wondered if there were some recent observations of yours you could share with our audience.
I think people have settled into the new normal, so to speak. In terms of litigation, the litigation we've seen out there basically laid out the way we suspected it would, which is courts tend to give very wide deference to board decisions unless those decisions are egregious, arbitrary, capricious. So we've had boards. I am heartened by the fact that the boards that are calling, they want to do the right thing. Spencer, to your point, I will tell you, most of the boards I've spoken to, the very first thing on their mind is how do we protect our people? Not how do we protect ourselves from liability, but we want to protect our residents. We've got vulnerable people, and that's incredibly heartening. And I also want to thank Spencer for coming. I'm very excited. I think we're going to see some good things emerging from that office. And I think this pandemic has given all of us a chance to reset. Yeah, we were kicking and screaming, and we would have liked to get here in a better way. But this is a chance to reset, and that means if your board has done things perhaps not by the book in the past, this is the time now to say, from this point forward, we're going to work with counsel. We're going to understand the constraints, the operational constraints under the statute and our documents. It's not business as usual. This is a really good opportunity for your communities to reset and try to achieve a higher level of functioning.
Thanks, Donna. And Spencer, when will your Sunny Isles office be open, or is it open?
So, yep, it is open. I'm going to be there every other week on Mondays, and people can schedule meetings with me by calling into the office. And I hope to meet a lot of you listening today. Thanks again for joining us and for taking that proactive approach to be educated on condo matters and condo law and be able to make the best decisions for your communities.
Excellent. And on the screen now is Spencer's contact information, email starting next week, and phone number right now.
Yeah.
So with that, Donna, it's 1 o'clock again. Here we go. So just a reminder, and we'll get it out to everyone that's been registered for these for our next event. We're going to change the schedule a little bit, but we're very grateful this week to have you here, Spencer, and maybe we can lobby the legislature for a similar role for HOAs, because I think there's just as many in the state. But thank you. And Donna, as always, your advice is so appreciated and sound. So we will talk to everyone in a couple of weeks. Thank you for leading in your communities, and we'll talk soon.
Be safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Spencer.